Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marina Shihei, and I'm excited to present with you an incredible panel of Indigenous storytellers and futurists and technologists here for Indigenous storytelling in the metaverse. So to share a little bit about our program, we know that when Taika Waititi broke through as an Indigenous filmmaker to win an Oscar in 2020, he said in his acceptance speech that we are the original storytellers and we can make it here as well. So what does this look like for Indigenous peoples using emerging technologies to preserve and continue culture, transmit oral histories, create art, and to advance our cultures into the future through a technological lens? During this conversation, we will discuss an Indigenous view of innovation, experience examples of Indigenous storytelling in the metaverse, and learn from Indigenous scholars about their vision for these tools within our tribal nations. Our speakers today are Dr. Gregory Cajete from the Pueblo of Santa Clara, Michaela Jade, who is Cabrogal woman from what is now Australia, from Indigital, Dr. Lee Francis, who comes from the Pueblo of Laguna, Maru Honiho from Maori, and myself. My family comes from the Pueblo of San Ildefonso, Pueblo Winge, and I'm married into the Pueblo of Zia. So this is an all Indigenous panel today, and I do know that there were some other mention about Indigenous peoples and adopting new technologies, so you get to hear from us directly about how we adopt these technologies. Very quickly, I want to answer the question, so what is the metaverse? And to put it simply, the metaverse is everything digital that runs parallel to our physical life, which, some people think may sound like the internet itself, but that's, there was a quote from the founder of Roblox, and he said that that's because the metaverse is very similar to the internet, but with more dancing. So it's essentially a collection of virtual worlds where users can meet, play games, chat, buy things together. Recently Facebook changed their name to Meta, and at the same time, we know that we can move into virtual work and video calls at any time as well. It can either be on reality goggles or with auxiliary instruments, but many metaverses exist in video games such as Roblox, Minecraft, and Fortnite. It is an immersive experience that lets you do things with other people that you would do in real life, like having fun and adventures and going to concerts. There's also things that we can't anticipate that show up in the metaverse that are fantastic that we might not be able to experience in our real life. And increasingly, this immersive experience lets us do things that we just physically wouldn't be able to do together. So, to hear what this means for Indigenous peoples, this group is going to speak to that story. But, first and foremost, I would like to bring in Dr. Cajete, who is an incredibly accomplished Indigenous academic, to speak about the Indigenous views of innovation, as well as ourselves, being able to use any frontier technologies as Indigenous peoples from our points of view, that these technologies are, constantly evolving with us and our cultures and our humanity, and that none of this type of thinking is something of the past, but something that is incredibly forward thinking in terms of our adoption. So thank you all so much. And Dr. Cajete, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please do introduce yourself to the audience. Thank you.
Sengitamo, as we say in Tewa, which means good day to all of you. And thank you, Marina, for that introduction of the metaverse or the multiverse, as it can also be called. But, the metaphor multiverse really is much broader even than just what we call the internet, because the multiverse really is really all of life and all of the processes of life in the universe. And if you look at all of the kinds of things that science has brought forward, you know that we live in only one part of this multiverse, but we actually can have access to other parts of it as well. And I think that's what the new technologies have allowed us to do in the context of the work that we do as Indigenous people. I'm an educator going on 48 years. I retired in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic from the University of New Mexico, where I was the former director of Native American Studies and also a professor emeritus in the College of Education, Language Literacy and Social Cultural Studies. I've done so many things, I've lost count, presentations all over the world, in United States and Canada, New Zealand, and many other places in the Indigenous world, as well as many kinds of courses, working with many students, over my long career. So I haven't really retired in that usual sense. I just call myself deinstitutionalized. And you can take that metaphor wherever you want to take that, but I'm deinstitutionalized, but I haven't retired from my work as an educator. And in that context, I've seen many kinds of evolutions, if you will, talking now about Native education, as we have moved in a variety of different kinds of directions, in terms of gaining control of our education processes, and still trying to do that, still trying to self-determine in our forms of education, bringing together, building bridges between our historical ways of life and our contemporary way of life, and now into the future, really beginning to explore what that is going to be for us as Indigenous people. And so as we look forward into that world, we know that there are many challenges, there are also many possibilities and creative possibilities, and certainly, in working with a lot of young people, I know that the tool of the internet, the tool of the multiverse, as you just described it, is becoming more and more the preferred way of learning and doing things. And so being an educator, you're always trying to find ways to engage your students in relevant ways, ways that have meaning to them, ways that allow them to learn and to understand and to bring forward their own talents, their own creativity. And so, as we look forward into this new world of the multiverse, I'm hoping that we will be learning how to use this tool appropriately, effectively, and really to the benefit of us all. I know that it is a new thing in the context of Native life. And certainly, Native people, our ability to sustain ourselves is very much dependent on our ability to adapt. And certainly, I think, the generations before us have shown that they have an immense ability to adapt to various kinds of situations and challenges. And so I look forward in the context of our conversations that are about to begin to look at the possibilities that we have before us, as Indigenous people, as people who are learning how to use this tool for our own benefit, our own use. And certainly, the craft of storytelling is a craft that is central to Indigenous learning, Indigenous teaching. So we have used, storytelling in a variety of ways in our past, and also are using it in our present, using and reclaiming our languages, reclaiming our histories, or learning about our histories, and bringing those forward in forms of literature and poetry and artistic expressions of various types of dance, but yet also holding on to important values, core values that we have as Indigenous people, and moving forward with those values, hopefully into the future in ways that will allow us to continue to sustain ourselves. So with that, I coined the phrase used by my good friend Winona LaDuke, as she says, what kind of ancestor do we want to be? And I think it's a perennial question, that many of us, I think, even given my age, I still ask that question almost on a daily basis, because it sort of brings you down to the reality of what are you going to bring forward in terms of your accomplishments and into the future, in terms of what you're going to provide as a legacy for the next generation. So that's what that means. What kind of ancestor are you going to be? And so that question is a perennial question. It's a question that is at the heart of Indigenous peoples and their ability to sustain ourselves through time and through generations. So I look forward, to Native participation in the digital multiverse. Again, remember, there is another multiverse. It's a natural multiverse, and it's much larger than just the digital multiverse. So we have to be able to build bridges between those two worlds of realities that we're encountering. One is a manufactured, created reality by humans themselves. The other is the natural reality that we are also part of. And certainly that's a balancing act. It's a challenge. And so I look forward into how we can use this tool to not only learn the tool itself, to be able to look forward to the kinds of things that we can use it for, but not to lose our connection to the much larger natural multiverse, which also we are a part of. So with that, in my language, as we say, Wukunda, thank you so much. And I look forward to the presentation of the other panelists.
Thank you so much. We'd like to hear next from Maru Niho Niho. And Maru, please introduce yourself to the crowd and let them know where you are today and the incredible work that you do. Thank you so much.
Well, kia ora everybody. Kia ora is basically hello or welcome, actually means good health to you in the Māori language. Right now, I'm in Auckland, New Zealand, or Aotearoa. It is approximately 8:45 in the morning, and I'm very honoured to be part of this panel and to sit with you all, and also really pleased that I can speak to the audience as well, and just touch upon who I am and the type of work that I do. So I am a games producer. I run my own game development company called Meteor Interactive. I've been making games for about nearly 20 years now. It has only been in the last probably 12 years that I've really focused on developing Māori games. So games that tell our stories, that incorporate our language, incorporate our customs. A lot of those games or game stories are from different iwi, which are different tribes from Aotearoa. And some of the games that I create are stories that I have designed especially for the gaming platform. So my job really is to design ideas around Māori storytelling, Indigenous storytelling. We have so many common themes with other Indigenous cultures. I mean, some of the strands of our stories, that come through either nature or atua or gods, whatever it is, it's very common, and across the Indigenous world. And so I feel that when I'm designing and thinking of a story through our culture, that it will resonate through others. And to me, that's really exciting. More than just being able to reach our young people here in New Zealand, we can potentially reach other young people across the globe. And so for me, our storytelling is most important. This is how you connect people. This is what makes people excited about you and who you are. If they don't know your culture, it's a great way to learn. So I wanted to take that storytelling aspect to the gaming platform. And I wanted to put our stories and show our language and show our culture in an interactive way. So rather than reading about it or watching a television show or whatever, which is still great, it's still a great way to learn, you can interact. So it's about you being in control of the narrative. It's about the decisions and choices that you make as a player as to the outcomes or the potential outcomes of what you do. And that's how you learn as well. So the gaming platform for me was, well, being a gamer myself, because I very much enjoy the gameplay experience. It just was a natural thing for me to want to do that. I realized when I was starting to create these games that I was on the right path. You know, it felt like my thing. It was like, okay, I'm making games, I'm telling stories on this digital platform, and I want to, you know, use that tool as a way to educate without educating. You know, it's not like, this is our culture and this is our language and this is what we do. It's like, play and you'll see. So it's a really immersive way to learn. My focus is really on Indigenous gaming, on Māori gaming, and just to give the audience an idea about, you know, the content that we create, I'd like to share a video. So that game in particular is called Guardian Maya, and it's probably the biggest game I've ever worked on, but it is a story that incorporates our culture, that incorporates actually so much more. There is a lot of underlying themes, especially around how we live with nature, or how we're supposed to live with nature, and what happens when we don't. So it's a bit of a sad story, you know, because it's about, you know, humans not living with nature, and there's a certain outcome. So what happens if we were to take this story to the metaverse level? Because in my view, gaming is the metaverse already, in a way. You know, it's something that is connected to reality, but it's not. It's an educational tool. Without being an educational tool, it has the potential to bring communities together. I think that's probably one of the main focuses of the metaverse, is about bringing people together and building communities through using certain tools available on this day at the moment, but potentially into the future as well. I think as Indigenous people, we have a natural, I guess we gravitate towards community anyway. So in that respect, I don't think community building for Indigenous people is a challenge. I think that's just a natural thing. What we could do though, as Indigenous people, is use the tools at our disposal to bring those connections together, you know, online or through the internet, or however, you know, we choose to do it. I mean, we're pretty adaptable, and take it to the next level. So how do we bring the reality of our cultural aspects together using technological tools? And most of all, how do we make that experience seamless? You know, for me, putting on a VR headset for 10 minutes, 15 minutes is enough. And I'm like, okay, that's enough. It's too heavy on my head. I get a little bit dizzy and stuff. So what is it in our future that's going to make our connections and community growth a more seamless experience within the technological world. Currently, from what I do, it's just the gaming aspect, whether you play that on your phone or on your computer, but things could look very different, you know, in our very near future. So I guess it's about, excuse me, it's about focusing on the near future, using the tools that we use today, and how can we evolve them to make them better? How can we make gameplay experiences better? Because a lot of people say to me, oh, I'm not a gamer, and I don't really play games. And I'm like, okay, do you collect loyalty points on your flights? Do you collect loyalty points when you go shopping? And they're like, yeah, I do. I said, well, that's kind of like a game, because there's a thing that you do and then you're rewarded for it. And then you're like, oh, I want more rewards because then I can buy more stuff. So you keep playing the game. So I said, it's a game. I said, do you play solitaire? Do you play Candy Crush? Oh, yes, I do. Okay, well, you play games. You know, I mean, people tend to think that gaming is like Fortnite, Roblox, and it is, but it's so simple, you know, in its actual design. It's all about reward, motivation, learning potentially. So I think some people feel that way a little bit about Metaverse. Oh, what is it? You know, what does it do? And it's like, well, it's not, in my view anyway, it's not too far from what we're doing already. It just depends on what we want to do with it and what tools we use to do that. And I think the main focus and the biggest part of Metaverse is communities. In saying that, we are looking at a technological future, as we all know, and we still want our cultures to exist, and they will exist in this technological future. It's about taking the tools that we use today, the knowledge that we have as an Indigenous people, and making them actually work seamlessly together as well. One of the big issues, though, for Indigenous people in New Zealand anyway, is that we don't have enough of our young people studying in the technological fields. So it's an issue that we need to fix, that it's very well within their hands to do so, but it's just not pushed that we can do it, where we know we can do it. So just to finish up what I'm talking, just to finish up my talk, I'm also trying to, and have built tools to encourage mainly our young people to look at a technological career path. And in doing so, it's about just inspiring them. So one of the games that I have just completed not so long ago is especially for that. It's for our young people. Actually, it's for anybody that doesn't really understand what coding is or what the technical realm is. So we developed a game to help give an idea on what it is like to learn to code. So just to end my talk for the moment, I will show you the video gameplay of that as well. If I can find it. So thank you, Ngam-Hee, and I shall pass it on to our next speaker. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It was really cool to see like video games with like cultural and like traditional symbolism in them, and guided by Indigenous peoples, because we know that when they're not, sometimes these symbols are misused. And so you know, that storytelling aspect that's embedded in the art, where most of us don't have words for art in our languages. You know, it's just something that is part of our communication and our interaction with the world. You know, those levels to it from an Indigenous perspective is really incredible. I thank you for all of your hard work in that space. Up next is Dr. Lee Francis, who is also from New Mexico, and one of my favorite forward thinkers when it comes to Indigenous futurism. Dr. Francis, please introduce yourself and share your work with the audience.
Thank you, Tawae and Kwatsi Haupa. So my name is Lee Francis. My family is from the Pueblo of Laguna on my dad's side, from the village of Quixchi, which is also known as Powari. I also go by the moniker of Dr. Indigenerd for a lot of the work that I've done in the last decade or so around storytelling, specifically pop culture and Indigenous pop culture, both here in North America and around the world, and the connections that we can make. I want to start by saying that I find it to be amazing that we are, you know, currently, right now, this moment, we are operating in the metaverse, right? We are having Indigenous conversations with people from around the world, you know, with kin, you know, on an island that is, I'm like, what, 10 hours away, 12 hours away from us, right? That is, you know, having people that are beaming in. I mean, just to think about that, and to take that moment to think about how we're able to converse and communicate right now that our ancestors had dreamed of. These are the song lines. These are the, you know, these are our story pathways that we saw over millennia that are condensed right now into like one instant. And I just find that to be so incredible and overwhelming. And also to be with, you know, such distinguished folks and speakers and people that I have, you know, Dr. Kahete that I've read for years and consider, you know, a hero and a mentor, and, you know, Maru, with the work that you're doing, a new hero and mentor. So this is awesome. So one of the things that I want to kind of showcase and start with is the work that I've done. And I think that this is a really good video that kind of teases off of not only how we're accessing this universe, but how we're coming together in terms of the metaverse, and where are we developing these stories, and where are we beginning to forward think about this. So one of the things that I founded back in 2016 was the Indigenous Comic-Con. We've hosted it in multiple cities at this point, and it's that part of where do we get that inspiration from? Where do we cultivate this, and how do we tell these stories? Because one of the things about the metaverse is that it's not entirely, it's parallel to what we're doing, but it's not entirely how we would want to operate. Like, I don't want to put on a VR headset or bring up my AR phone and do the same thing I'm doing now. That's just living, right? Like, I can just live and not have to use the technology. So part of the exploration of the metaverse and the ways I think that we're enlisting it in cultural, you know, in the ways that we're approaching it from a cultural perspective and an Indigenous perspective, is that we are looking at, I think, three factors. One is projecting into the future. So there's a futurisms that we want to see ourselves in as Indigenous peoples. Two, that it is about self-determination. Dr. Kahete talked about the idea that we're taking ownership of the stories and of the world that we're existing in, that we haven't had as Indigenous peoples through the history of colonization, right? So as we're entering this space, we're able to remake this world and remake this metaverse in a way that centralizes our knowledge and our identities, rather than being sort of a side story or a side quest to the history of the world, right? And the third part that I think is really about the fantastical, right? The imaginative, the fact that in the metaverse, I can fly. In the metaverse, I can get on the back. I swear that was the coolest thing, is get on the back of an eagle, right? I can launch magic, and that's not too far off from our traditional stories. So in many ways, we're hearkening back to our traditional stories, except now I get to truly experience this. I don't have to have a barrier in front of me, as I hear a story and I can imagine it, I actually get to experience these moments. And that's something that is even more immersive and so cool about how we're directing this, right? So let me show a little bit. It's about a 2.5 minute video about what the Indigenous Comic-Con looks like and where a lot of my thought processes come from around Indigenous storytelling, and that inspiration, that spark of what we try to do as Indigenous peoples, and some of the work that we have done over the years. There we go.
Three, two, one.
People talk about gathering of nations. This is the gathering of nerds. And I believe that that's going to draw people to Albuquerque to share in this indigenous comic art that we love.
Nothing else like this has been done before in terms of bringing all of these worlds of pop culture together for Native people. There's so much perceptions of Native art needing to be pottery or jewelry, and those are incredibly viable and valuable. And this is as well. So when we're looking at the kind of support that entrepreneurs need, right here, right now, we get to show everybody what we're doing, and I think that validates our own work.
I've spent my life trying to educate non-Indians about Native Americans, and I think this new style of educating particularly younger people will expedite all of that educational experience that we need.
I've seen a lack of outlet for tribal entrepreneurs to actually distribute and get their business out. This is finally a venue with their brand, their name on it, so that they can get out and feel comfortable in the space promoting themselves.
I'm very used to the Native American art market. That's how I make my living. And this is a whole nother world. And this actually has this potential to introduce people to the Native cultures and Native arts without even knowing that's really what's happening.
All of these kids I see walking around are getting inspired by people that look like them.
And just to see the kids excited about it, the youth, that's what it's all about.
I think in Albuquerque, we can stand out from the crowd. There's a lot of little seeds being planted here that I think people will take back to the Pueblo, they'll take back to their community.
Albuquerque is the centerpiece. The Indigenous community here is very strong. I want folks to purchase this stuff, and we want folks to hang it on their wall, and we want folks to read these stories. That's the support. We got people from Baltimore, from New York, from San Diego. I heard people came in from Australia. That shows us that it is valuable. When you see all of these people around you, it's incredible.
So that shows a little bit of what I think part of when we talk about the storytelling is, that spark, right? So why are we telling those stories? Where do we have that opportunity to tell those stories? How are we using the tools and the technology? Who is using those tools and technology, and how are we cultivating that? Because I think when we take a step back and we ask about Indigenous, or when we talk about Indigenous storytelling in the metaverse, I like to, I'll coin that term, or I'll use that term that a lot of people have used. It's on t-shirts and whatnot, in pop culture, is the future is Indigenous, right? And I think that that's one thing that we need to strive towards within the metaverse, is that right now the metaverse is built for gaming and commerce, right? Like that's what it's platformed on. It's, even with work, that's a commerce, that's a communications piece. But the gamification within the metaverse, and I think what we really need to do with an underpinning of stories, is that our stories, And the way that I was raised is that our stories are a balance of ceremony and celebration, right? They're there to educate and entertain. And that's, I think, one of the crucial pieces that's missing right now in the metaverse is that aspect of ceremony, that aspect of, how do we got a lot of celebration. There's a lot of dances, right? There's a lot of things that we can do with our Roblox and our, all the places and all the things we can build. But how are we adding ceremony to that? Because storytelling is a ceremonial time, right? Every story has a life of its own. Just in the same way that we talk about the tools that we use. The tools are built commercial right now, but we know traditionally our tools they had a life, they had a voice, they had a song, they had a story. And those tools, that's why we still have them, right? That's why we still have tools that are handed down over generations that we still use as Indigenous peoples. So how are we thinking about that with the metaverse? When I put on my goggles or I lift up my phone in a system that's already built to be commercialized or commodified? And I think that's where we need to make that kick, right? And so when we bring Indigenous storytelling forward and we talk about that, how are we saying that the future is Indigenous? How do we make this so that we add those aspects of self-determination, of futurisms, of fantastic, and the fantasy, the fantastical, the wonder, right? How do we build the wonder into this type of work? And I think the work that we've done with the Indigenous Comic-Con is about cultivating that inspiration. How do we get more people involved in this? Because the counterpoint to this is what we're constantly playing against, I believe, is we're constantly playing against this concept, not a truth, but a mythology that Native and Indigenous peoples are just we're very primitive. And that in order to be more Indigenous, we need to get back to, the sort of primitive nature. We need to go back to living in this primitive world, but we've always been technologists. Our stories talk about that. Our stories reflect how we charted the stars, how we had traveled the globe, how we had used whatever was at our disposal in a way that was sustainable, in a way that was balanced, in a way that gave value to the things that we were using and the things we were trying to accomplish, our goals and our communities. So I think that what I like to say in all of this of bringing Indigenous storytelling into the metaverse is it's not just the story part. It's the foundations, the philosophy, it's the underpinnings of that story. It's the culture that we bring with this, the language that we bring this, the ceremony and the celebration that we bring in all of this. And how do we do that in a way that, still, brings wonder and joy, that educates and entertains? I think that's our challenge. I think that's our goal. I think that Indigenous folks have a really good vision of that already. So I think we can, really be able to create this together. And I think that we can really create something incredibly dynamic as we continue to imagine what this future in a metaverse and a real verse look like.
Thank you so much, Dr. Francis. I'm excited to get to a Q&A, but first we have a presentation as well from Michaela Jade. If she wasn't able to join us today as she's traveling, but she did send a presentation, and I'm hopeful I can not have too many technical difficulties here. But I wanted to introduce her work a little bit. So she runs an organization called Digital, which will be covered in the presentation, but I met her through the United Nations, at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, through my own work in cyber sovereignty and looking at government to government relationships with tribal nations and cyberspace and the responsibilities that this whole ICT for D world, the tech for development world has to our tribal nations, whether it's our cultural intellectual property or our digital human rights or our government to government relationships. And she takes her work and also informs World Economic Forum and some other high level entities. So, not only are we telling stories in this space, but we're figuring out, what our rights are, how to live, and a lot of the liminal questions Dr. Francis posed, he's the foremost voice on, and it's really incredible to hear that. So moving forward into Ms. Jade's presentation, and I'm so sad that she couldn't be here with us today, but hopefully this is a good starter for all of us with her work. Did this start, you guys? Can somebody confirm, please, if you're seeing this? It says that I'm screen sharing, and let's see if it plays. Please tell me if you can hear. Can you hear? Or, one moment. Okay, so I'm going into slideshow mode. I'm hearing that there's no sound, and I'm not sure how to correct that. I do apologize. So we'll give this one more minute. I do apologize. There is a video, and I don't know why the sound isn't coming on. If I stop sharing and try again.
I have a quick question. Oh, never mind.
Can you hear this? Or no? I apologize. Can you hear this? Okay. So I'm just going to manually go through, and I apologize, Nick. This is not necessarily ideal. InDigital is a future-focused, world-leading, female-founded, and First Nations-led company, creating culturally diverse and inclusive digital material for all. She did begin by speaking to the elders and acknowledging the land that she was on. They do work building cultural connectivity and critical technology skills and capability in education, industry, and First Nation sectors. They do this because there is a growing pool of First Nations who are culturally and linguistically diverse. Or they need to bring talent to tech to address a $1.2 million job deficit, and provides businesses with social license to operate and manages risk around ESG. The critical technology stacks that they work in are AI, computing and communications, distributed ledgers, blockchain, machine learning, media creation, media manipulation, AI and artworks. These are some of the companies that they have worked with. As you can see, there are many incredible organizations here. This is their team and what they're looking forward to in the future. So what are the opportunities? You know, a lot of our tribal nations don't believe in writing words. And so they say that we don't need the written word. We can live our cultures through all aspects of our cultural expressions. We can meet this need without expanding expending vast amounts of money. We can program practically anything. For it may have machine learning projects, and that high-paying jobs don't necessarily require formal qualifications and can be done flexibly. InDigital is really fascinating for me because when I met her, one of their organizational members had created a Minecraft for Indigenous youth. And this Minecraft game told one of their creation stories, and there is a form of it that in the game you had an intergenerational aspect, because the student who was playing the game had to stop and ask elders answers to questions to get past certain levels. So even the structure of the game, intergenerational, it had to do with cultures and storytelling. And moving forward, you know, I'm really excited to see what they come up with. We do know that Indigenous peoples face many challenges, and the challenges that they face with the transfer to the metaverse are identity management, cultural appropriation. I think all of us are concerned about this. The metaverse will continue to be an extractive industry. We need to manage what's extractive, by whom and for whom. That there is a current push to replicate the real world in the digital space to create digital twins. And that this includes satellite and sensor technologies in countries. For us here in what is now New Mexico, our tribal nations don't allow photos, don't allow videos. You can find these photos and videos, unfortunately, of our tribal nations located in many of these maps that don't respect our boundaries and borders. And I think that's a significant concern for all tribal nations, especially for sacred and religious sites and practices that should not be replicated in gaming technologies by non-native peoples. Moving on. So what can we do moving forward? We can connect up together. There are 400 million First Peoples across the globe, and we're a significant stakeholder group for everyone. We can be conscious of invitations to help for who's inviting us into their spaces and how we can reframe those opportunities, and for those of you who are non-Indigenous, please be conscious of how you do come in to help. And, if you're allowing Indigenous peoples to guide those engagements on our own, because that's the only way that we're appropriately engaged. And to ensure our people are paid for input and inclusion, especially in the area of ESGs, our knowledge is incredibly valuable. So I hope you do all connect with Mick. Outside of this, she is an incredible incredible woman. Okay, moving on to a Q&A aspect of this talk. We're open to audience questions. Please do leave them in the chat and they'll be transferred to us in our chat by the Tech Change staff. But first, I would also like to ask a question of Dr. Kahete. He has an incredible body of work and academic work, and I do encourage you to look for and read his books, and you can find them on all major booksellers, including Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and wherever you are in the world, I'm sure they have a book by Dr. Kahete available. So I would like to hear what you believe is different and unique about Indigenous perspectives on innovation. I know you have these models for Indigenous science and our perspective in these spaces that are very unique, and I'd love to hear that as it applies to technology.
Well, Indigenous creativity is always evolving, and I think our discussion this afternoon really underlines that nature of evolution in terms of our ways of viewing and doing things, as we evolve as Indigenous peoples. Indigenous creativity is very tied to a deep understanding of natural creativity and, our respect for the innate creative potential that each of us hold as human beings, and also as is represented in the natural world. And of course, many of our traditions, not only acknowledge that, but actually, create, as Lee Francis was saying, a ceremony, to acknowledge and also to participate in that natural creativity and bringing forth the natural creative instinct of human beings as well. And I think those are the kinds of things that are very important to really think about when you begin to, in a sense, indigenize the metaverse in the sense that we're talking about, because what is missing, aside from what Lee Francis has said, is also that sense of connection to the natural reality. And I think that many Indigenous people would say that the tool of the digital tools that we are now exploring and we're using and we're being creative with, also have a that we should also have a sense of how we connect those tools to the realities of the natural world and the natural world that we live in, and how we begin to create an awareness of not only our young people, but also all people, with regard to the preciousness of the natural world. And so I think there's a lot of potential, through Native stories and storytelling, because they are essentially environmental. They're talking about environmental ethics. They're representing in story form environmental ethics. And that one of the major areas of, I think, contribution of Native storytelling in a digital sense is in that realm of representation of environmental ethics of Native people, both past and present, because as you know, many Native people are involved with a variety of different kinds of issues that involve environmental ethics and such, around the world, around the indigenous world. So that's what I would say, in terms of this question. I think we're at the very beginning of exploring, what is, first of all, what is the technology? What is possible with the technology? We're exploring as we did with, becoming contemporary Native artists, let's say, as an artist, you explore different kinds of media, you explore your ideas, you're bringing your own life experience into that telling of a story, through whatever medium that you choose. And I think that this is really no different in that sense. And I think Lee's presentation really emphasizes how the digital media is now taking new forms, as we speak, with new young Native artists coming into the storytelling world, of Indigenous peoples. So I'm excited about, a lot of the possibilities. I know that there would be questions about, and I think you've covered that, in what you've just said, Mariah, in terms of the, the kinds of concerns that Native people would have, like appropriation and who's getting the real benefit, in terms of the monetary value and what is being depicted. All of those kinds of concerns are things that should also be a part, of our considerations, as we move forward. But I think that in some ways, this is the brave new world, that we're exploring. I'm reminded of a story of the Huichol creation myth, and in that the culture hero is fighting with his axe, and the axe has a mind of its own, and so he cuts down the brush so you can create a garden. And every time he goes to sleep, his axe tells the plants to grow back again. And so he continues to use the axe to cut it, but he hasn't respected his axe. He hasn't given credit to his axe for the service that the axe performs, in cutting the shrub back so that they can create a garden. So it's a kind of a funny story, but it's kind of also a very human kind of dilemma, how to respect the tool and how to use it appropriately. And that's also a Native story, in that context. So I think we're all in that kind of place where we're beginning to sort of try to understand this new axe, this new tool that we have. We're trying to learn how to use it appropriately and for the benefit of all, and certainly for the continuation of ourselves as Indigenous people to sustain our life and their traditions through time and through generations. So these are all the kinds of questions that will come up, I think, as we begin to explore and begin to really open this up. Remember, it's a very new area, for Indigenous peoples. We're getting involved in a variety of different levels and a variety of different ways, but it's still a very new area for our tribes and our communities. So it's going to take some education on both sides of that digital divide, let's say, to begin to find the way that is going to allow us to use this tool to its maximum benefit for us as Indigenous people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We do have one question, and I would like to hear from everyone on this last question. So we have 3 minutes, so just a minute each if we can. And before we move on, if this is the end of our conversation, thank you to everyone who joined us. And we do say at the UN, nothing about us without us. So thank you for being here to hear our perspectives in this dialogue as well. So do the panelists, this is a question from Maori Lab. Do the panelists believe our presence in the multiverse, in the metaverse, will change any issues that we have faced in the real verse, and provide a balm for historic hurt? And if yes, how? So big question, shorter answers, you guys. Maru, do you want to start?
Yeah, that is a big question, and it's a very relevant question as well. I think the key to being in the multiverse, metaverse, and gaming itself is authenticity. Okay, you get to speak with your authentic voice, or our authentic voice. And so if it comes to educating or teaching around historical hurt, it is a really good place, or it could be a really good place to do that. And the reasoning is because what we've all said before, it's really about community. It's about connecting and community. And so it's not just one voice, but it's a community's voice that's heard. And being able to talk about those things, being able to present and make people who don't understand, what our different cultures, our tribes even have been through. We all know as Indigenous people that we have almost lost our culture. We've almost lost our language. There's been a struggle, and a very long struggle from our elders, from our kaumatua, until this day, to have that recognition. But more than that, it's understanding what the problem is, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people are like, oh, well, that happened so long ago. Why are you complaining? Why is it an issue? Move on, move ahead. But to move on and move ahead, those issues need to be, should be, and continuously should be addressed and recognized. One way to do that is, we have real life conversations. We talk about that. But if we're bringing it into the context of the metaverse, where it is all about connection, where potentially you can have an interactive experience, whether that's a game or not a game, it provides another platform to address, those issues and concerns. It kind of comes back to what I was saying a bit earlier with gaming. You can learn without learning. You learn by doing. You learn by interacting. So yes, that's a brief answer to that question. I better move on next.
Thank you so much. And I apologize for the short time. We're just at the end of the program. I hope we do continue this conversation together. Lee, or Dr. Francis.
So I know that we're right at the end. So I'm just going to say like this is a great question. I think we need more than a minute to have a conversation about this. So I'm just going to encourage people. We got a really great website called thetribecalledgeek.com where we talk about technology and native pop culture, indigenous pop culture throughout the world. So this is something that I think we're going to get some conversation on. We're going to have some really good writing about with some amazing native writers and scholars. So check us out at atribecalledgeek.com and we can expound upon this a bit more.
Excellent.
And thank you. Doae to everybody.
Dr. Gahete. Brief answer. I apologize, we're at the very end.
No, I just agree with Lee and Maru. Exactly. This is education is communication, and so this is a tool of communication. And so how we use it, to learn about ourselves as well as to inform others, has great potential. And I look forward to all of the possibilities that will come, as a result of this.
Excellent. Thank you all for joining us. You're all so incredible, and I am thankful to be here with you all in community. Gundawoha to everyone who came. Thank you all for joining us. And we hope to have more programming like this and see this at more conferences around the world. So have a great day and enjoy the rest of your Frontiers in Digital Development Forum. Take care.